Now that we have some basic understanding of both VOPs and as well as the VEX, let's put some use how we can use our this knowledge, this scripting knowledge to actually benefit. And here you can see we have this second attribute triangle that is throwing an error, and that is because we are writing an attribute and calling the variable that does not exist. That is the error. But I'm going to just delete this because we do not need this. And in here, maybe let's come over into this side and create another example. And first I'm going to create a line node in here. Here we have the basic line. Let me go into the parameter of the line, maybe zoom in into my node editor, and onto the line we can, using the line node, we can create just this basic line. I can define the length of the line, I can define the number of points if I enable my point display. And here as you can see, I am creating more or less of these points. And here I can adjust the position by playing around with the origin. And we have the direction. Right now we are creating the length along Y. Let's zero it out, and onto the X, let's maybe add an A1. Now we are creating the line along X axis. I can play around with the length. And in here, if we want to create more or less these points, we also have a node called resample. Let's type resample and add this. And what the resample node will does, we can adjust the length parameter to create more or less of these points. So we can subdivide these lines with the resample node. If I were to go into my line and let's say I want to lower down the number of points, let's maybe keep them only just these 2 points, the point number 1 and 2. If I enable my point number, as you can see, we have the starting point and the end point, 0 and 1. And now if I add a resample node, here as you can see, the resample node is resampling our line and adding a lot more points. We are dividing our line into multiple points. We are adding more divisions. And we can adjust these number of points by playing around with the length parameter. So we are adding number of points at the length of 0.1 meter. If I were to increase this value, I can create less points because I am adjusting the length. If I were to lower down this length value, I am creating more points. So by using the resample node, you can resample your lines to add more points. Let me hide my point display. Or into the resample node will also output some attributes for us. And the one attribute that we are interested in is the curve view attribute. So if I enable this, it will create a curve view attribute onto this line. If I press and hold the middle mouse button, here as you can see, we have a attribute that is called the curve view attribute. So what is the curve view attribute? It will store the values that will start from 0. So when our line is starting, we have the value of 0. At the very end, we have the value of 1. So the 1 means that we are at the end of our line. So we can visualize this, our attribute, and you can visualize any attribute if you hover over through that node and press on this I button. And that will just bring up this inspection window, the same inspection window that we were inspecting by pressing and holding the middle mouse button. But that window only appears as long as I have pressed and hold my middle mouse button. And if I want to keep this window open, just hover over to that node and click on this I button, and that will bring up this inspection window. Let me click this again. And now by clicking this, here as you can see, we have some on-off switches. So what all are these on-off switches are? These are the visualizer. So if I enable this option, here as you can see, Now we have the curve view attribute visualized as an A color. So here we have some color going on. So at the very start we have an A purple color, and at the end we have an A red color, and between we have some interpolated values. That is why we are getting the different R, G and B values. And I can actually adjust this visualizer if I don't want to visualize this as an A color. Let's say if I want to visualize these values, what are these values? I can adjust this visualization. So whenever you click on this option, enable this, what that will do, it will add an A visualizer. So we can play around with the visualizer setting. If you come over here onto this location mark, where that looks like an allocation mark, these are the visualization. And if I just click on it, and here as you can see, all of the visualization has been turned off. And if I click this again, now I have visualization turned on. And if you press and hold, sorry, not press and hold, right click on it, and here as you can see, we have some visualizer in here. And here as you can see, we have created this curve viewpoint attribute. That is the scene visualizer. And onto the object, we have some of these options. But right now, when we have click this option, that has created a visualizer in here at the scene level. And here as you can see, we have this curve point attribute visualizer, and we can adjust the setting by clicking on this button. Just click on it, and here as you can see, we have the curve view visualized. And right now we are visualizing this as an A color. And here as you can see, I can change this into the type. Okay, so right now we are visualizing this as an A color, and let me click on it, sorry, right click and enable this to enable my visualization. And here as you can see, I can enable or disable my visualization in here as well. Now just click on this button, and in here I'm going to change the type from color to marker. Okay, so what will this visualizer will do, it will visualize our attribute as an A values. And here as you can see, onto the style, we have the style as an A text, which means that all of these attributes should be visualized as an A text. Let me close this. And here as you can see, we have some values. At the very first point, we have the value at 0.05, and this value is increasing, and it will end all the way up to 1. So the 1 means that we have reached the end of our line, end of our curve. And between them, between the 0 and 1, we have these interpolating values. And the value of 0.5 should mean that we have reached the center of our line. Curve view is a very useful attribute. So let's click on it. I can just disable my visualization in here. And here as you can see, now this visualization remember our settings, which mean that please visualize them as an A marker. And I can also inspect this by going on to the geometry spreadsheet. And here as you can see, we have an A point attribute curve view. And at the very first point, we have the value of 0. And at the very last point, we have the value of 1. And between them, we have these interpolating values. And we are visualizing these same values by this visualizer. If we click on it, and here as you can see, we have these values. I can play around with the resample node to create more or less of these points, and we have these attributes updated because now we have more point. We are dealing with more point. So maybe let's create more of these points so that we have a lot more divisions to work with. Maybe let's lower this down to a value of 0.1. And let's hide the curve view visualizer, and let's also hide the point display. So now let's create an attribute VOP node in here, and let's connect this. And now let's dive inside. And here as you can see, we have these two nodes, the geometry VOP global and the geometry VOP output. And in here as you can see, we do not have the curve view option, which means we need to create our own bind node to import our curve view attribute. So let's add a bind node in here. And now we need to set the name of the attribute that we want to import, and we want to import our curve view. So let's type the name of our attribute, and it is a float attribute, and we have successfully imported our curve view attribute. What I want to do with this attribute, now that I have imported, so what we can do with this attribute? For this one, let's say maybe let's create an AP scale attribute with this curve view. So I can write this attribute by adding an bind export node, and I'm going to create an AP scale attribute. Let's connect this in here. If I middle mouse button, now we have the P scale and the curve view attribute, and both of these should have stored the same values, because we are importing as well as exporting them. So nothing is happening in here in between. If I go into the geometry spreadsheet, and here you can see curve view and P scale, both of them have same values. So basically what we just did, we just duplicated our curve view attribute and just renamed this to P scale. And in here, now that we have P scale, which means I can create any geometry. Let's say I am going to create a sphere. Let's create a primitive sphere, because it's a very basic piece of geometry to work with. It's very lightweight. Let me move this aside. And in here, if I want to create a copy to points node, and you know that copy to points node understand the P scale to set this input geometry scale. So let's connect this. That is the geometry to copy, and these are the points. And now if I view this, and here as you can see, now I have this gradually increasing my P scale value. And now I can play around with the resample node to create more or less my copies. And I know that at the very start I have an P scale value of 0, and at the very end I have a value of 1, and that is creating some sort of light bulb. And now let's go into the attribute VOP node, and in here let's remap these values. Let's play around with these values, because right now we are just importing and exporting them. So in here let's do some operation. And the one operation that I like to do, I like to remap these our incoming values. So I can add a fit range node. Okay, so let's add this. So the fit range node will remap our values. So it has this one value, the value that we want to fit, and I want to play around with this value, this curve view, and now on to the output. That is called the shift. Let's connect this at the output, and now we have some operation going on in between. So let's bring up the parameter of this fit node, and here as you can see we have the source min and source max. So source min and source max represent that we have the minimum and maximum value on our source. As you know that curve view is our source, and I know that this attribute start with the 0 and end with 1. I know the source input range. So I can go into the fit range node. I can say that source min is 0 and max is 1, and that is correct. And on the destination min, we are just keeping all of these values same, which means that if the output is min and max are the same, so which means that this node right now is currently not doing anything. We are importing the attribute as 0 and 1 and writing this as 0 and 1. What I can do, I can just play around with this destination min. Let's say I don't want the maximum value to be 1, my output values to be 1. I can just play around with this parameter, and here as you can see, as I am playing around with this destination max, what I am effectively doing, whenever we have the value of 1, which means at the very end, we will not get the value of 1, but we will get the value of 0.3. I can play around with this. I can change this to 0.2. and I can actually expose these parameter as well. And here as you can see, we have the source min and max, and we have destination min and max. Because I know that source is 0 and 1, I don't need to export this. Let's maybe just export this destination min and max. So I can just press and hold the middle mouse button, press the middle mouse button and click on this promote parameter, and I want to promote my destination max as well. So just press the middle mouse button and click on this promote parameter. So now we should have the parameter exposed in here. And here as you can see, we have them. And here we have this one. These are renamed to minimum value, okay, in the destination range. Maximum value in our destination, that is the minimum value in our destination. And we have these parameter, and we know that we are starting with 0. I can fit this. Let's say I don't want the values to be 0, but I want to start with something. Let's say value of 0.7. And now here you can see our very first sphere will not get an scale of 0, but a value of 0.07. And by doing so, I can play around with this remap, our values. And if you want to rename this parameter, right now here as you can see, we are getting this very long parameter name. So what I can do, I can dive inside and I can expose the connected parameter by just double clicking on this button. And here as you can see, we have connected this parameter. As you know that this parameter is responsible for exporting, and just double click on this to expose our second parameter as well. That is the min and that is the max. So in here as you can see, we have the name and we have the label. So we are labeling this in here. That is the label. What I like to do, I would like to just rename this to minimum. So I'm going to just remove all of these. I'm just keeping this to minimum. And now if I go back, and here as you can see, this parameter has been renamed to minimum. And now let's just rename this to maximum as well. So let's click on this second parameter, that is the max, and let's rename this label to maximum. Let's go back, and now we have changed our label minimum and maximum. Now in the next lesson, let's do this same operation by writing the VEX code.